All right, well, we're back. We've got the whole crew, and we're just going to start talking about masks, because you should be wearing at least 17 at one time. If you're not,
put the
then...
whole box on.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? Actually,
just
I
duct
support
tape the
that
whole box
from
to your
a
face.
natural selection perspective. I am really okay. All of you...
Put the whole box on and put the bag around your head.
If you love masks as much as I love masks, I want you to be as safe as possible. And the only way to make sure that you aren't spreading viruses is to take the plastic bag and wrap it around your head and tie it tight. And just sit like that for like 20 minutes. And I think that we'll have a very, very solid election next cycle.
Be sure that you when you do it, you tweet out, "Trust the science."
That's exactly right. Oh my God! You know what? You missed it last week because climate was something that I would have loved to have double teamed with you. But seriously, this whole this scientism shit, the believe the science, trust the science, that is of all the things.
12 years, guys.
It's all these people who say
the world's going to end in 12 years. Come on.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me, speaking as a fucking scientist here, is none of them are actually doing the work. And then when they read a headline, they don't even bother. They don't even read a fucking paper title like an abstract.
Nope.
They won't get it. They won't get that far. They'll read the CNN headline and then they fuck off, thinking they know something, something more than the other person in their peer group.
I had somebody come up to me back when I was subcontracting for Google. Right? They came up to me. I was selling Chromebooks, and this guy came to me and he said that I am opposed to fracking. I'm like, whatever. Why? And he goes, because there's all these chemical spills that's happening. I'm like, all right, go show me an article where it actually happened. So he pulls up an article, it's from CNN or something like that, and it says, new study shows, something about a leak, blah, 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 blah. And what it was a model simulation of what would happen in the event that a fracking well did leak, even though none has happened yet. And I'm like,
right.
Did you read the, third paragraph in where it says, this is a simulation of what could theoretically happen in a worst-case scenario?
As it never has.
As it never has. That's what we're doing right now. We're sitting there, we're coming up with fictitious scenarios. They write a paper on these fictitious scenarios as if it's actually happened, and nobody reads critically or to the third or fourth.
Well, we should go. No, let's be specific there because you said that they write a paper on these fictitious blah blah blah. Okay. The papers themselves aren't bad. If you run a model,
sometimes
I'd even go so far as to say most of the time. Because a competent scientist is going to say, this is a model of what could happen, here are our parameters, here's how the model ran, here's the results of it, here's how this compares with anything that has happened, but, if nothing has happened, fine. And then you have people who say, here's how my paper agrees with this, such and such normative claim.
Yes.
Which is not science. It doesn't matter how you go about that, but if you're going to go about your conclusions by basing them on an exterior premise which is not involved, that's not going to have any bearing on whether or not you have a testable hypothesis and whether or not you collect the data that does test it.
Well, it goes more than that. I think the issue that I tend to have with modeling studies and where a lot of science is today is they start from the base assumption of steady state, right? So they'll put in an assumption like steady state to something like climate or any one of these other things, and they'll say that under normal circumstances, X is going on normally, and any deviation from that is abnormal. When in fact they've never actually verified or done the measurements to make sure that we are actually at steady state.
Well, that's the thing is
their deviation.
So this is where I nitpick on that. If they make the claim that a steady state has already been achieved, and then they fail to cite appropriately, I'm right there with you. If they say steady state is an assumption that we go based off of this model, and they clearly state that they're only making that as an assumption, fine.
Yes and no. The problem is that they don't always. A lot of times it's an implicit assumption, right?
Sure. And I understand. Yeah, that could be. For people outside of a field, that could easily be confusing.
Right. So what ends up happening, and this is again, I'm bringing up climate because it's a perfect example of it. Mm-hmm. They presume that we were at steady state in the 1800s with zero temperature records to validate that. So all deviation, all temperature increases.
Well,
after
no record.
That point,
every record disputes that.
Well, yes, that's true.
I mean, no, we weren't at steady state, because every record says we weren't.
Hold on. That's only recently, though. That's only in the last 5 to 10 years. Right, so most of the stuff that they were basing their record off of was the bristlecone pines, which looked pretty flat for a really long period of time.
All right.
But that's because bristlecone pines don't really replicate temperature all that well. It probably has more to do with like CO2 in the atmosphere that they actually are replicating.
Well, they replicate good years for growing and bad years for growing.
Right. So we pump CO2 into the atmosphere, and all of a sudden they grow like crazy. And so they're assuming that's a temperature curve. Yes, you are correct that some of the other proxy records that we have do show that we would have been in flux the entire time. But the models that we build...
Which is totally to be expected. I mean, on a 100-year time scale, you could say, okay, things have been relatively flat.
Right.
But like on 1,000 years, no.
On 1,000 to 10,000 years, it absolutely hasn't been per the proxy records. And even then, proxy records have a lot of issues because they kind of compound data into a very compressed time scale. It's not like a year-on-year reading. It's more
that's the other thing.
An average over the last 150 years.
It's kind of like, with carbon dating, anything less than 50 years is kind of bunk.
Yep.
Anything over 50 years, you can start to narrow in. You can even get, after you get past 100 years, you can start to get down to the single year level of precision.
Sometimes. It all depends on what you're measuring. Because...
But and it depends on your isotope pairs, etc.
Right.
But just going out there, say radiocarbon dating as the basic one, carbon nitrogen. That one, you can get down pretty close to a year after about 100 years in terms of the length. But if you get anything less than that, it's kind of like, you can't tell.
Well, and don't forget, right, that's going to presume that there's been no contamination of the source object in that period of time, and that's part of why there's that issue until you get to 100 years, because by the time you pull from that's 100 years out, it's been preserved. And
in the same exact vein here, one of the major issues that they have with ice cores is diffusion, which fuzzifies the situation a bit. Now, if you take things that are distant enough apart, you can deconvolute, you can use diffusion models. There's ways to get around a lot of this.
Now, that's actually a really good point. So would you mind just kind of explaining what you mean by diffusion in the ice model?
Okay, so...
Or in the ice core samples, I have to say, not models.
This is a very detailed thing if you want to dive in.
So presumably, when you go and you look in these ice cores, you find these little bubbles. And inside these little bubbles, there is trapped gas from the atmosphere at the time.
Yeah, presumably the air of the day.
Yeah, and we can say, there's isotopes that are involved, or you can say there's gas concentrations, what have you. Find over time, the difference in concentration between any two regions is going to cause a drift in concentration.
Yes.
So basically, stuff likes to spread out. Now, temperature will drastically decrease the rate at which this happens, but what will happen is you won't get an exact value at an exact point in the ice core. You have to sample
keep
the
in
whole
mind
thing.
that when we start talking about ice cores, too, ice cores are based off of precipitation over a long period of time that gets compacted by the actual weight of the water on top of it. And when we start talking about these kinds of things, the average gas bubble that you see trapped in the ice core is going to be averaged with a layer between it, just because it doesn't actually get to the point where it's compressed ice for hundreds of years. So during that entire period of time, it's kind of an open cell structure, and you're going to have diffusion with the atmosphere.
Yeah, so you'll have actual convection. You'll have convection and diffusion going on until it gets cut off from the atmosphere above.
Right.
And then under compaction, it's going to get compressed a little bit. There's going to be a difference in concentration between that layer and the layers adjacent to it.
And to kind of dumb that down just a little bit, the easiest way I can kind of dumb that down is over time the ice kind of gets thicker and the air bubbles rise. Is a really dumb way to put it.
That's not quite it. So the idea is that so you know how with sand, if you put water on top of it, it'll soak down through it?
Sure.
So that's kind of the idea here. If you have enough sand that the bottom of it gets turned into glass, the water can no longer pass through the glass. Right? Just presuming that you had that much sand that at the bottom it becomes solid glass somehow. So at a certain point, you're going to have enough snow on top that there's not going to be any circuitous air channel to get up to the top.
Trying to steal my sandwich.
No worries. I'm sure the same what you say.
So at a certain point, it's going to become so, the path will be cut off, and the bubble will become trapped, whatever air pocket is there. Until that time, the air has contact at the bottom of whatever channel it can make its way down to the ice with. The air technically has contact with the outside air through diffusion because it's a very long, tortuous channel to get out to the air.
The other problem that you run into with ice cores is ice cores actually are not, like we like to think of it, and this is something that we kind of talked about last week, we like to think of the Earth as only having one heat source, the sun. But that's not entirely true. we have a geothermal heat source, and we have the solar heat source. And what ends up happening in an ice core, or in an ice sheet for that entire period of time that it's developing, there's also gaseous admixture from the ground below, because the water will or the ice will melt and it'll circle back down, and that'll carry some gases.
Yeah, there's other cycles that go on.
So what ends up happening with ice cores is you also have this period, especially towards the bottom of the core, where you might be getting gases from other regions entirely, solely because of melt and thaw cycles.
Now, one thing that should be made clear here is that this isn't to say that ice cores are completely fallible here. It's not. It's just that
they're not bristlecone pines.
Yeah, they're not bristlecone pines. It's not just a good or bad year for growing. That's the issue here. Here's another good example of a corollary, because it's very much identical in the math. If you have if you are so stupid that you hold a copper rod over a fire, you will notice very quickly that your hand gets hot. That is because the heat is diffusing from the hot end of the rod in the fire to the cold end in your hand. So that's the way that the change in concentration in gases between adjacent layers in these ice cores will move. Now, temperature has a big effect on this. The fact that it's in a frozen ice core should give you an idea, especially if it's like an Arctic ice core. The air is not going to be moving around a whole lot. But if you're talking about a time scale of like millions of years or thousands of years, you're suddenly starting to get into the realm where things are able to move around, an inch or so.
Right.
And so what that means is that you have to take samples along the entire ice core, which is already kind of a dumb moment. This is going to happen.
Yep.
But that also means you have to deconvolute this diffusion action which has happened. And it's nonlinear, and it's also non-uniform across the ice core, because the parts that are deeper have had more time to diffuse. The parts that are shallower have had less time.
Right.
Now, all of this is possible to do in modeling, and it's very accurate and so on. So ice cores are, I would say, the gold standard to go against.
Well, and that's one of the other problems.
But they still have these flaws.
Bioproxies, which all proxies are flawed, right? Because you're not taking an actual measurement. But when you don't have anything else to rely upon, you should rely upon the proxies.
Yeah.
Bioproxies fundamentally always have this problem of there are going to be good years and bad years for growing of whatever that organism is. And
shit, it could have been like a hurricane ripped all of the fucking leaves off the tree,
Right. The assumption is that we can correlate this with temperature, and on average that will be true. But for extended periods of time, there could be unique events that won't show up appropriately in biorecords, which is one of the problems with proxy samples. That being said, when we start talking about most of the proxy samples, they actually correlate pretty well across the planet in terms of what we think paleologically has happened with the actual thing. But going back to models and science, one of the problems that you have is you have a whole bunch of people who don't actually dig into things like this, and they'll just take a quick headline, and the only headlines that get published are the outrageous ones.
Well, that's largely because journalists are fucking retards.
Yeah, I mean that's.
There's some good ones out there that have above room temperature IQs, but the vast majority of them, holy jump fucking shit, in the meat locker,
fault, right?
in the meat locker, and in degrees C, just what the fuck is wrong with their heads?
I think at the end of the day, I don't even know if I blame them. I do blame them.
I blame them.
The problem is that the papers are hiring more and more heavily biased people who don't have a really solid science foundation behind them, and they're trying to report on science. And so a lot of times...
they're outside the realm of competence, and they're retards, so they're going to go with it anyway.
Well, as it is with rats fleeing a sinking ship like Kotaku, or wherever, they've got to work somewhere, right?
Well, the other problem that you run into is that if they don't produce an article that's interesting enough, they won't be able to produce the next article, right? So on one hand, they have to spice it up, and the problem is when they spice it up, they get things horribly, horribly wrong. Or they have to do two things. They have to spice it up and dumb it down. And the combination of those two pressures in any advanced scientific field is a very bad thing.
If they didn't bury the fucking lead in the last paragraph of the article, it wouldn't be quite so bad, would it?
Yes.
Then they'd at least have, like, some argument that, oh no, I wasn't being dishonest. I was just hooking them so they could read sentence 2 of paragraph 1 and finally see it's complicated. But no, it's buried down at the ass of the article, going, oh, by the way, everything I just told you is bullshit.
Well, and I think one of the best ones that I saw...
And that's if they do that.
...was one that sat there and talked about how the Trump... It said the Trump EPA is changing how we calculate the social cost of carbon. Right? And so it goes...
All of that right there just sounds like shit, by the way.
It was.
The social cost of carbon is being recalculated. Tell me, please, how many social units?
It's
5 Al Gores.
They have a process for it. The only problem is that they turned around and they go in and they interview the Obama administration.
Got a fucking ISO number too.
And the Obama administration officials are saying, "Oh yeah, they're radically changing how we calculate things." And then you go to the Trump administration officials and they say, "Yeah, actually, this is how we're supposed to calculate things," and the Obama administration is the one who did it wrong. And they kind of play this halvesy place with it, except we have documentation which shows that the Obama administration violated their own rules associated with how to calculate.
Which is not surprising in the slightest.
The Obama administration violated their own rules? No, that can't have happened.
Yeah, double minus bad for you if you doubt the great King Obama.
Well, and that's the thing, is they don't go any further in their research on a lot of these things. They'll just make a statement.
I mean, God forbid you prove that Solyndra is going to burn money as opposed to make it.
And a really good example right now where Craig and I are both getting kind of pissed off is this whole thing with masks. And as much as Craig and I can argue for hours, literally we've done it before hours.
Well, yeah, many episodes.
Many episodes.
Oh no, here's the thing. Here's the thing. We agree that masks work. We don't agree on when they should be used.
We agree that.
But we agree that. We agree on the fundamental basis.
That they can work under the right circumstances with the right...
We agree on the fundamental basis, and I err on a different threshold of safety than Steve does.
And we all agree that bandanas are stupid.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're wearing silk, woven cloth, cotton...
beaded masks...
you're actively harming people.
Which is one of the reasons why... when all of the psychologists and sociologists came out reading the mask studies and trying to argue with me over hazmat shit, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. They're like, see, it works. And you're like, are you serious? You have no idea.
Dude.
Your
nose. That's right. I wanted to rip into those fucking, the fucking study that came out where they're just, like, they did basically a meta-analysis, like, on an ensemble of and one of them was the fucking dust study. It's like...
Dust is kind of bigger than coronavirus.
Literally not water droplets. You're talking about dust collection, not the same phenomena involved.
And that's got like its own static profile.
It doesn't matter if it has anything. It doesn't matter if it even remotely resembles the results you get off of the actual thing you're trying to model. If it's not the thing you're trying to model, then it's not going to model what you want.
And the other problem that you have with a lot of these studies is at the end of the day, right, a lot of these are based off of what happens within a foot of your face, right?
Well, even if they go out to, like, say you had 6 feet of distance, you used particulates that are in roughly the same size range as the droplets. If they're not fucking droplets, then they're not going to behave the same.
That's true. Yes, that's absolutely.
And like you can't even make the argument that you had the same Reynolds number.
No,
because it's a
you're
droplet.
You're going to have evapotranspiration.
Right.
Like
it's stupid. No, I was like, there was someone who was trying to argue with me that masks wouldn't work recently because the virus is a tenth of a micron, and it can only stop it only is set for a certain percentage down to 0.3 of a micron. It's like, okay, yeah, for one virus particle you're fine. Let's just assume though that we're talking about a human exhaling and not a fucking virus counter spraying out individual viruses.
But
a droplet's going to have, if it has more than 5 viruses inside it, it is physically impossible for it to be smaller than 0.3 microns. So it was one of those things. Just like, come on.
The problem, though, right, is if we start talking about people who are asymptomatic, right, the actual velocity at which the particulates are being emitted and the rate at which particulates are being emitted is so low as to be basically nothing. Most of them are going to hit the ground and be completely useless and wiped out by sunlight.
Right, and we had this argument before.
And all the other stuff. Right.
We had this argument before because there's a difference between asymptomatic infections and pre-symptomatic infections.
You can call there to be a difference, but until you can scientifically demonstrate that difference,
everybody who's ever incubated a virus is pre-symptomatic before they have symptoms. It's words that
you have to demonstrate that pre-symptomatic cases have a higher infection rate than true asymptomatic cases, right? Like, you'd have to demonstrate that, and there is no study because you specifically said that's difficult to study. I totally agree. It's really difficult to study. But we don't sit there and make the assumption that something is going. It's not.
It would also be inhuman to get a qualified, 100% certain study on something like that.
So if you can't study it, then it's not a scientific concept, and it's not up for debate.
And when we talk about these things, and I say from a safety perspective, there's a certain point at which you have limits of risk, and there's certain places. So anyway, going back to the thing that spurred this here, you're getting mailed cloth masks or some stupid shit, right?
Nope. I am now required to sit on, because Biden passed an executive order.
Right.
All employees are required to sit in their cubes for 9 hours a day wearing a fucking mask. I'm going right back to 50% telework because I'm super scared of COVID. I told my boss that. He's like, I understand. I'm like, yeah, you bet you do.
Excellent.
If they're going to make your life hard, you have to reciprocate.
Well, he's a fucking federal employee, so he's not doing fucking anything anyway.
Sure.
You know what, good sir? If it wasn't for me, the trash cans wouldn't go out on time.
Oh, there's trash cans. Someone's got to keep an eye on them.
They are scary. And paint chips. Paint chips.
Especially the children who are very hungry.
I am very afraid of paint chips. We, maybe it's the gamma radiation.
Do they have asbestos in them?
I don't know. Oh, they do have asbestos in them. What do you think we've been fighting IH about for literally 4 months? It is a war. And by the way, I've gotten a defector. I'm very proud of myself. He actually came to my boss and asked me to quit and join us. It's a war. It's a war over asbestos right now. So we have, to give you an idea of how stupid the stuff we have to deal with is, they have taken, I have a location where I have 4 samples that were sampled for asbestos, and there was no asbestos. And IH came back and said, did you take 3 substrate samples in that location? I'm like, are you serious?
Huh.
Yeah, you have to take 3 specific substrate samples that test for asbestos. They have 3 substrate samples that can't be paint samples or whatever else.
Right.
So
that you get out your wine corker and just drill into the wall and hand it to them.
Oh no, because see that would require an exposure assessment, and if I don't have an exposure assessment for substrate, which by the way we don't, I'd have to put on a respirator.
But hey, COVID. You can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, man.
Oh, my God. No, you know what I did? I turned to my boss. I said, I'm sick and tired of this shit. So here's what I got an emergency light that I got to take down off a wall, right? It's been there for 20-some-odd years. So I go into my boss. I say, so I don't really want to deal with IH. He goes, I don't blame you. And I'm like, okay, excellent. So here's what I want to do. Instead of unscrewing the bolt in the wall, I want them to go in there with a Dremel and cut off the head. Because that way we can pull it off the wall and we don't disturb anything that might potentially be asbestos, but we know is not because of sample data.
Jesus.
You know what you should do, though, is find a way to bill it to IH. Put on a fucking $1,500 one-time use Class B suit, and walk in like a fucking spaceman. Very carefully pry the thing off with a screwdriver, and then put the screwdriver in a bag with the device and mail it to IH with the Class B suit folded inside out around it.
You know what? They are creating their own problem. So what I've told my entire department to do, because I manage our priority list and all this other stuff, I've said just sit there and send all your documents to them and just let it sit in their queue, because they're not processing anything. Like, they're just not processing any documents right now. Nothing moves through IH.
What the fuck?
I have something that I sent out 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago to them. I sent them out. It is identical to another document that I sent out at the same time that was like a 1X, because they determined a 1/4 inch gap between like one material and another was a tripping hazard. And so therefore, like, the boats weren't going to sea if we didn't fix a plate. Like, that had to be done. So I got that one out, and it's identical to the next one that I wrote. And the next one I wrote's been sitting there for 6 weeks, and they're like, well, we can't guarantee that it's safe. I'm like, I'm putting them in respirators. What else do you want? I'm like, well, we need more details about how to spread water.
You know what they need to do is they need to provide robots that are fully autonomous, that can be driven from someone's bathroom. Which mind you is a tripping hazard, so they're going to have to belly crawl into the fucking bathroom to sit on their toilet, and then put a little UAV in.
I hope that's a handicap accessible toilet.
You know
of course. It has to have the rails.
I used to make fun of, with the previous company that I worked for, I used to make fun of them because they'd be like, we're engineering something. And you're like, yeah, you're putting it in one of 3 boxes, right? One box is a yellow plastic container. Another box is a big old honking glove bag. And the other one is, oh my God, we're going to die. Let's pontificate about how we're going to die. Right? Those are the 3 boxes that you have to deal with our stuff. Now, the reality is you can probably expand that to 5, but it's really not, not inaccurate. IH has 2. You spritz it with water, or you put a vacuum on it. That's it. Those are the 2 things that you do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Yeah, I was wanting to get into that.
60% effective, and that got an EUA.
I've heard 70. Actually.
That's the truth. No, okay. No, I spoke with... Okay, so you both know kind of who I'm talking about here, but without disclosing, I spoke to someone knowledgeable about this from a policy side of things. It's 70% effective in the United States. It is 60% effective. And the reason why that's true is because not all of the variants are in the United States. It is a 60% effective vaccine.
And as much as I'd love to say it's a 60% effective vaccine, I toss in the caveat that Big Pharma has not done all the appropriate studies. They have not had the time to actually sit there and conclude anything on this. So 60% effective is the best possible case scenario for what they have.
On top of this, we went through the committee brief previously for the Pfizer vaccine. I haven't. And this is, of course, I would say this is laziness on my side of things here because I just haven't done it yet. I haven't gone through any brief they might have given to a committee from Johnson & Johnson.
Well, this one went through a little more quickly. I mean, it literally was only approved yesterday.
Come on. You know that was like, I took a document that was like 80-odd pages and turned it into like 3 pages, all right? Come on.
All I can say is I sat there and I'd like just finished my 300-some-odd page report on nuclear modeling for like what's going to happen, and I walk in on you sitting there and reading out of that thing. I'm like, holy shit, I am not going to make it 3 hours if he keeps talking.
Look, like I said, we turned a report that was fucking large into like 2 tables, 3 pages.
So it's one of those do the best you can with what you got kind of thing.
I got it.
I think that's pretty reasonable. I
I
don't know.
I mean, at least it wasn't a we've got to pass the bill before we can read what's in it situation. You know.
Listening to Craig talk about the Pfizer vaccine is what will happen if China ever catches me overseas. right? They're not gonna be able to win me with like the sexed up Chinese chick because I'm too fat for that.
Well,
right? I know you're
actually, you've got a whole other issue if you go to China.
Then they're
if we're to believe.
That's not gonna work because of my pain tolerance. But then they'll just play on a loop. Craig reading the Pfizer vaccine, and I will crack. I will crack, motherfuckers.
Oh.
And it's gonna last 10 minutes before I crack too. It's gonna be terrible.
At least it won't be K-pop.
I can take K-pop. I can't take you reading that stupid fucking thing.
Again, 80-odd pages, down to 3.
Oh, God.
Suck a dick, alright?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a little dry, but, come on. At least it's 3 pages of dry instead of Gone with the Fucking Wind of the Desert.
That was War and Peace, and it only lasted 10 minutes.
God, you're acting like it's the Grapes of Wrath here.
It wasn't Grapes of Wrath.
Fuck
Damn it, George.
Go choke on some fucking dust.
Of Mice and Men was better.
Yeah, except you're Lenny right now.
No. I'm the hot chick.
Dude, hey, just turn around. It'll be okay.
So, the long and short is basically, we've got a vaccine that is a traditional vaccine for all the people that were spooked about the
yeah, it's based off of
genetic
adenovirus,
engineering, whatever.
Which is one of the common cold viruses. It's based off of the adenovirus, and it's weakened adenovirus with cross whatever the fuck it is that puts the bright spike on the outside.
There are a couple other dead virus type vaccines coming down the pipes. By the way, a lot of them aren't like U.S. companies, but there's actually quite a few that are overseas that they just have to go for United States approval.
Well, there's the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is already one of those type 2.
Yeah, those vaccines are coming. It's not just the mRNA stuff or Johnson and Johnson's crapshoot, right? Like.
Now, to be honest, too, this one does have. It's more effective if you're infected. Still, it's not a 90 or 95%, but apparently it's 85% effective in avoiding. What was it? The really deleterious effects and long haul and all that shit. So,
certainly. And my guess is that even in the 40% that aren't fully covered in terms of immunity, you're probably still going to see a decrease in the severity of the symptoms.
Oh yeah, doubtlessly. I mean, if I was going to get one, I'd probably want to get one like that because, personally, I'm just a little chintzy on the mRNA vaccine.
Yeah. I'm one of the people who would hold out for the mRNA, and that's fine.
But with that said,
I think people should have choices on these things.
I actually can go get the mRNA vaccine anytime I want.
God, you're a faggot.
Because I am one of those special people that deserves it. I've also told my...
You said that, and I kind of believe you, but I also believe by deserves it should be forced to get it right now.
I've got a letter and everything. Hey, you want to know what's really funny? So we're being forced to wear the masks, right? And so we had somebody in my department who was a Biden voter, who admitted he was a Biden voter. And he apparently spent like an hour and a half that morning just raging because he's gone along with all of this shit the entire time. And he's even scheduled his vaccine. And so his first comment when they sat there and announced that we were going to be stuck in the office for 9 hours a day in a mask, right? His first comment was like, "What if we get the vaccine?" And they're like, "Yeah, that doesn't matter," right? So
just like Fauci.
He turns around and he comes in and we're talking about this and he's just like, "I just raged for an hour and a half. Like, is it too late to recount Georgia?" And I was like, "Yeah."
There's a lot of buyer's remorse out there. A lot of buyer's remorse.
All the
really
fucking just every fucking time I see this regret come up, I'm cheering. It's hilarious.
I think that there's a lot of people who were admitting that the Democrats were like being political about the whole entire thing, but they were kind of hoping that if the Democrats got in power, they'd start to like act seriously and professional.
Okay.
And they don't realize these people are childish. They're like childish because they're children. Like it's.
Yeah, they never really left high school.
Yeah. Like this is not something that that they were gonna like blow over with. If they won, the consequence of them winning is they're like, oh yeah, this is what people voted for. You're like, no.
My favorite part of it all is all these people that thought they were going to get $2,000 right on day one.
Where's that $2,000, Joe?
$1,400. They're like, at least it's $1,400. No, you shut up. He already had $600 as down payment. Like, okay, when are you getting your $1,400? It's like, well, And is it going to be $1,400 because they said they're open to negotiation?
Yeah.
Well, I'm like, okay, so maybe $1,400 by March, and then that's not happening.
Well,
you know. It's really funny.
But this was going to be $2,000 checks out the door day one.
And you know what? Here's the kicker. Any of you guys who are listening who voted for Biden, if you put Trump in, there probably would have been checks because they would have lost everything already at that point. Like, they would have gained nothing by playing these games, and they would have stopped playing these games.
And that's never minding that, 93% of the money in this recent stimulus bill goes to everything other than COVID?
Yep.
So, about $500 million, $500 billion goes to actual COVID shit. Like the people for the bailout checks, companies, COVID research, schools opening, that kind of shit. $1.5 trillion is going to fuck all, like bridges in California and New York.
Look, I benefit.
Problem state, buddy, and the problem is that deficit spending shit we talk about. This is where it's getting funded.
I mean, look, my state will benefit with Democrats in power, right? Like it will, and I feel so sorry for the rest of the country because Cuomo deserves to be thrown out of office, and New York City deserves to basically rot for the deficit spending and the bolstering of the rioters. Like, the bottom line is that is what should happen.
Yeah.
They should have to sit there and deal with the fact that the city will go bankrupt. They should have to go through the whole bankruptcy process. De Blasio should be humiliated. Cuomo should be humiliated, but instead they're going to get bailed out. Although it does kind of look like Cuomo's not going to get a free pass on this one.
Yeah, but that's because he's getting Me Too'd right now.
He's getting a double shot of Me Too.
I think the Me Too came up because they found out about the corpses.
Right.
The Democrats only unleash the sexual assault allegations after you are no longer useful to the party.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is the only reason they're going to get the the backswing on the dead bodies is because they had the Me Too to pull it out.
Yep.
It's a 1-2 punch, and they come back for the third arm. You know.
So, to anyone who's listening that hasn't heard about this, let me just break it down real quick. Cuomo's gotten two Me Too's. Apparently, he said it was all in a joke.
With receipts.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
most importantly, there's physical data here.
I am absolutely going to go with I do not believe this was a thing until it was convenient to remove him as a thing. Right?
Yeah, fine.
This is not something that they just... all of a sudden he did it and they ran straight to the media and everybody published it. It was literally, he became less useful than
just look at Project Lincoln.
Anti-Trump.
Yeah. But yes, like Project
Lincoln. Everybody knew what was going on behind the scenes at Project Lincoln. And
it really is.
The evil orange man. So 15-year-olds, send the old guy your photos. There you go. That is just some spectacular moral high ground. Project Pedo.
Oh yeah, I mean at the Lincoln Ambler Project, they really had their priorities straight. Or well, I don't think I should say straight.
Like a circle.
They had their priorities in order. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They can have a seat. Just have a seat right over here.
Yeah, absolutely. So back on the whole stimulus issue, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Representative Gosar out of Arizona proposed an amendment to that would actually really kind of fair things up. Oh no, it's beautiful. It changes them from $1,400 to $10,000, and takes the monies necessary to do that out of the remainder of the stimulus bill.
That's
perfect.
Hilarious.
Everybody wins. $10,000 for every American.
Here's the thing. Like, and we had discussions about this. We don't need to go over all the back and forth on whether or not a lockdown could work, but I think the fundamental agreement was all things working out nicely, and I'll be kind to myself there. A lockdown done properly would work, but since we managed to fuck it up for an entire year.
If we had turned around and shut things down for 2 weeks, and it was a hardcore shutdown, maybe it would have worked.
But again,
we didn't do that.
Since we fucked up for an entire year, I'm against giving people just like a handout for not working, like, ahead of time. But since it's after the fuck up, I think we can say, all right, fine, maybe some people are actually hurting here. We should find out who needs help and get them help. Fine. Safety net for this, social safety net, and because it was government that fucked it up, I guess we're going to have to continue doing things fucked up because we have a government.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think that...
a one-time check is probably not going to solve shit for a lot of people, unless it's like a windfall that'll keep them alive,
No,
and not everybody needs it. Not everybody needs it, but some people, sure. You can make the argument.
I'm going to go with, if they're going to give money out, they should give money out unilaterally, right? And
unilaterally or uniformly?
It doesn't matter, really, either or. Seriously. But regardless of how you want to, what phrase you wish to use.
Oh, what, do you want Canada to help?
The only people that I think, I was thinking unilaterally, everybody gets one, but that's all right.
All right.
The only thing that I would not want to see is I don't want to see the businesses get bailed out. Well, maybe the small businesses, but I certainly don't want to see Walmart getting a check.
I don't want to see one thin dime going to Amazon or Google.
Well, that's why I like that one person had the rule that, like, small businesses get the front of the trough, so to speak.
I would be okay, like, if they turned around and they said they were going to do this, but they were going to impose a tax on any business that was that stayed open during this period of time to accommodate for it, I would be okay with that.
Sure.
I mean, sure, any reasonable person would.
Yeah.
Now, businesses can come back. If a business has to go bankrupt, basically, like, there should be, you couldn't really do it by legislation, but, like, there should be, like, credit forgiveness for having a pandemic crater your business. So,
but
businesses can be rebuilt.
Didn't really crater the business.
Right.
Like,
it was shitty legislation and executive orders that collapsed economies to fuck over Trump.
My understanding is that your state's actually in pretty good straits after this whole entire thing.
Yeah, damn right.
My state's the one is fucking fucked up because
they decided to kill all the old people.
Yep. Well, I mean, killing the old people doesn't really matter. They don't really contribute to the economy at the time that we killed them, anyways. Right? Like.
It's not a natural selection issue if you have the one guy ordering them all into the kiln,
Well, and don't forget, right? They had a good life. They lived past their prime. They're in a nursing home. What? We don't lose anything.
They're in a nursing home. They have beds. Those are like hospital beds, right?
Exactly right. Look,
it makes sense from Comrade Palmer's
people suffer through old age, or just turn them out.
I don't know. I mean, it depends on how insufferable their kids are.
I think that we. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, that's true.
I mean, were they like the matriarch and patriarch of a full fucking 7-tier family of Biden voters, or are we talking about like the two people with the pitchfork and the painting? Holy shit, we're all going to hell, and it's going to be great.
Unfortunately, when you start talking about New York, about half the state is the picture of the people with a pitchfork.
Yeah.
And the other half the state is a whole bunch of idiots in the city. And
so it's funny. My great aunt and uncle are New York City urchins. It's the funniest fucking thing on my mom's side of the family. Of course, typical New York Jews. A lot of them are most of her side of the family is just like. Well, I won't say they're left-leaning. They're liberal.
Well, hold on.
But not in the classical sense here.
The amount of hatred I may have is going to be directly proportional to how good of a sandwich they can make.
Let's see. I think he does like an insurance company, so I mean, probably a decent sandwich. Probably make a good Reuben.
That's okay. I can accept progressive policy stances and liberalism if they make a good Reuben. Like.
So he I found out.
I
found out they're gonna get their vaccines probably in like a week or so. If what my cousin said like a week ago about being scheduled for 2 weeks comes to fruition. So they thankfully are, and they're old, 80s I think. So that means that they're well into the age category where they should be able to get the vaccine, but also they're definitely inside the age group that Cuomo was going after. And I was just telling someone earlier, I'm just thankful that they didn't get a star pinned on them and sent down the train to the death camps.
Well, he has shown a real propensity to want to herd up a certain demographic and deny them their rights and businesses. Not that there's any historical.
And I mean, Cuomo was participating in it, but De Blasio was worse than Cuomo.
Yeah.
Like, I do not know how de Blasio is going to remain mayor of New York. Right? New York City.
He's terrible.
And again, I want to be very clear to those...
I kind of want to ask that question.
Like,
it says, will you vote for him?
Well, there's a guy that's running that sounds pretty good.
You talk to anybody outside of New York, and they're like, oh, you're from the city? What's it like there? And you're like, no, I am not from the city. Most of New York is not from the city. A very small proportion of people are from the city. About half. Like, we literally, it works into just about 50-50 in this state. And I think, what was it? Trump got 45% or something like that?
Yeah, that's basically everybody outside the city.
So pretty
and
much...
And then some holdouts inside.
Pretty much think of the city as you just assume everybody in the city is a Democrat. And everybody outside the city you can assume is pretty much not a Democrat because we have to tolerate the city stuff.
Well, and pay for it.
Well, yeah, and they claim that the city pays for everything, but the reality is it's like a 5% difference in terms of what they consume versus what they produce, despite the fact that they have trade ports. And it's like 10 square miles in a third or fourth largest state in the union kind of thing. Like, it's holy shit. What the hell? We the majority of the highways and the things that the state actually has to pay for are not located anywhere near New York City, and they still consume almost exactly the same amount as they produce. They have the trade ports, and they almost consume as much as they produce. Exactly. It's stunning. And then they're like, oh yeah, it's You guys would be a third world nation without us. I'm like, no, motherfucker, without you, we could actually afford to have lower taxes.
It's funny how that works. Kind of like if you got SoCal out of California. California would be nice again.
Well,
let's be honest here. That state's fucking dead. Dead in the water.
All I can say is I root for Cascadia. Good luck.
No,
also, I like the Greater Idaho Initiative.
The state of Jefferson.
Oh, is it Jefferson?
Northern California is actively trying to...
oh, no, they actually are. They really are. There's also a section of Oregon that's trying to join Idaho.
Yeah, that's actually really cool.
And they're going about it the right way in both cases. Jefferson's really serious about that, though. They really are.
I liked the 5-state solution, and then I liked the 6-state solution, and neither one of those worked in California because the rest of the people are just like, nah, we need the farmland and all the money.
And the water.
So here's what ends up happening, right? And I have friends who are Democrats, right? And the way this conversation goes is you're like, hey, why don't we split up the state and allow better representation of everybody? And they go, yeah, we kind of like you guys locked up and not getting any representation. And that was an actual conversation that I really had, where they turned around and were literally on the lines of, we would much rather take the population representation and not allow you guys to actually be represented. So,
and then you say, okay, King George.
New York, by the way, has attempted to split itself up into 3 different states.
Right.
So
there's New York City, and then one around Albany, and then the other one.
No. So it is the 3-state is basically Long Island, as its own state. And then you have the western part of the state, which is like Buffalo and Rochester and all of those major cities out there. And then you have the northern part, which is the Adirondacks and that region.
Okay.
But it's we've tried to do it too, and we almost. Well, I say that, but we really failed. The last, not this past election cycle, but the previous election cycle, it was actually on the ballot to go amend our state constitution, and that was what we were trying to do. That and term limits. Those were the two things those of us who wanted to amend the constitution were trying to do. And basically, the Democrats came in and said, "Oh, it's really expensive. It's going to cost you a lot more money." And we're like, "Yeah, but term limits. Term limits.
And don't you also lack a way to recall your governor?
I don't know about that.
I've heard there's no recall thing in New York, and that's obviously got to change because a situation like this has to be avoided in the future. All kinds of situations like these have to be able to be overturned in the future.
I mean, at the end of the day, I can't wait until the next gubernatorial.
Well, you saw that with Newsom, with the recall, what was going on with, that was hilarious with that, right? They got the recall, and then all of a sudden, ballot signatures were important.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've got to... I guess they didn't adequately fortify that count, you could say.
Yeah, isn't that amazing how that works?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what happened out in I think it was Syracuse too, or the Utica-Syracuse elections in my state. They turned around and they didn't give a shit about the voting machines in Michigan and Wisconsin, but all of a sudden it was a big deal, and signature verification became a big deal as soon as a Democrat was threatened.
Isn't that funny? Gosh, it's so peculiar. Well, as I say, if it weren't for double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all.
Pretty much. I also still like that it was the guy that God, what the fuck was that district? I think it was a New York district too. There was the one was it 22 or 60, whatever the fuck it was. But the guy who at the national level said that there's no chance that the voting machines have a problem counting. Was the one who went to court and demonstrated with hard physical evidence that there was a problem with the machines and the counting, because the Republican was able to successfully get the court to overturn the fucking election for that district.
Yeah,
well, at the end of the
because,
day, right?
they fucked it up that bad, and the judge is like, well, the best I can do is allow you guys to recount stuff, and then the Republican definitely won at that point, and the Democrats were pissed.
Boy, that's weird.
At the end of the day, right, this comes down to that whole it's a cabal thing, right? And that's
now, mind you, we're only quoting Time here. We're not posting anything other than what has been said by Time magazine in their reference to a conspiracy and/or cabal of highly powered individuals and corporations. We're not going anywhere outside of the realms of Time magazine and their recent articles.
We're doing no more than fortifying our opinions.
Absolutely. We're fortifying our opinions on a well fortified election.
And
properly documented, too.
At the end of the day, when we start talking about this, a lot of these problems were things that everybody kind of agreed were actual problems, until such time as a group of people actively stopped them from looking into it.
Now, mind you.
Now, I want to say that Sidney Powell and her friggin' ridiculous nonsense...
The Kraken!
The fucking Kraken shit. Holy shit. We talked about that earlier, and I was like, yeah, this is stupid.
Oh, God, that was funny.
It was absolutely retarded the entire time. The problem that you have is that these kinds of people will highlight stupid shit like that, and that's why we didn't get rulings on things like what happened in Pennsylvania, some of the ridiculous nonsense that went on there.
Oh, speaking of, there's been a resolution to the Pennsylvania issue. I don't know. Oh, no. The Supreme Court has decided that it's
a
fine.
Moot point.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really. Well, if you haven't been injured by it, you can't really bring the case. That makes sense, right?
So hold on. The only way that it could conceivably be brought to court then would be if somebody says they were wrongfully elected.
Well, no, actually.
Or would that not also be true?
Well, that would be. We would have to see.
You can't bring it to court until somebody's had an injury.
Right.
And after somebody's had an injury, it doesn't matter if they've already been sworn in.
Yeah. The case is moot.
The only way that you could. The only way you could really do that is to show up at Inauguration Day, halt swearing in, and say to the court, "I've been wrongfully elected."
I mean,
maybe
they tried
that might work.
Right? They tried that ahead of time, and they said no.
Well, no, they didn't try that because Biden wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, the whole thing's the whole thing's very fortified. It's a very fortified situation. Is all I can say.
In the same vein here, one thing I should point out is that it was equally funny to watch the Republican in that New York district I was talking about say that there was no voter fraud, nothing bad was happening, and basically suddenly not care about machines failing to count votes properly.
I mean,
yeah.
Whenever the shoe's on the other foot, it's always flips the script.
If anybody thinks that either party is working for them, they're lying.
Well, so this goes back to what we said before, which I think is still a fairly reasonable assumption at this point. Both parties are benefiting from this dumb fuckery. And
they are.
It really comes down to the voters at the more local jurisdictions to come out and say that, fucking enough and secure our shit. Like, that's why, and I don't think, I'm under no disillusions here, I don't think DeSantis is really, in the same way, working for the American voter, but I think if he wants to keep the power he has, he's going to have to do something that's reasonable. So when he sat there and called out for voter ID, it's like, fucking right. Get that shit underway.
Yeah, never mind that voter ID is pretty much standard across the board everywhere in the world other than the U.S.
Rwanda, let alone elsewhere.
So I wanna.
It's biometric in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I wanna toss this out, right? So I work in New York. We do not have voter ID, and at least for me, it's not a crisis. It's actually there is less likelihood of our vote being tampered with than it was when we lived in Massachusetts. And I say that not that it's not an issue, right?
Jesus, are you eating a plastic bottle?
I'm sorry, I was crushing something.
So it's just Craig being Craig, right? Like, he's got to fiddle with himself.
I was done with the water bottle, all right?
Yeah. Be like a mature adult and throw it on the floor. So
I save space in the can, all right? Next time we'll just empty the bag more often. Go fuck yourself.
So in New York, right, we don't have voter ID, and it's not a real crisis at where I'm at, because I'm pretty sure the highest vote count that I've seen at the polling station I've gone to is all of 250 people. Right, the closest.
Now, is that counting the members of your local cemetery organization, or is that not?
We do not, because we're Republicans.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
You got to keep in mind that the only graves that are getting counted in New York State are the mass graves outside of New York City.
That's exactly correct.
Where all the old people now reside.
That's correct. They prefer that to their nursing home accommodations.
Well, at least according to Herr Cuomo.
Just think that when we bury them, the ground stays relatively consistent temperature year-round. They're never having to complain that it's cold or hot because it's always light.
And again, the people who caretake for them never have to hear the complaints.
That's true. But yeah, so it's actually not that bad for us. But when we did live in Massachusetts, because my wife and I have consistently registered as libertarians, they actually did, when we did have voter ID, actively thwart our vote, or more specifically my wife's. They usually don't try to fuck with me because I show up and I'm like, oh really? And the guy's like, oh yeah, I guess you can vote here. And you're like, yeah, that's right. That's what I thought, motherfucker. Right? But they actually sat there and delayed my wife for 4 hours, making her get unnecessary documentation to go vote.
You see, that's somebody, at that point, that person's personally liable and I'm suing them.
Well, I mean, we almost got to that point because it was literally like...
At that point, I'd rather spend the money to just to make sure that they have to spend the same amount of time that I do making their lives miserable.
It'd be
complete spite at that point.
It was really irritating. So I was voting in New Hampshire at the time because, A, I was mostly living up there, and B, why would I give up my residence in a swing state as opposed to Massachusetts,
Fair.
right? But my wife was registered to vote in Massachusetts, and she was trying to vote there. And it literally took us 4 hours of producing numerous pieces of documentation. First, they wanted, you go in with a license, and you show your license to vote, and they say, oh, that's not good enough. Please go get us a birth certificate. So we brought in the birth certificate. And then they said, oh, that's not good enough. That's not a long form. And then we had to go get her passport. So we brought in, I think it ended up like we drove back and forth to the stupid thing.
I think at that point I want every single piece of the same kind of ID from that person so I know precisely who to sue.
And by the way, each time that we went there, they'd have us go wait in a corner for like 30 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
So like eventually, so you turn around and you get a little bit discouraged with the whole entire thing, and eventually you're like, I'm going to do this to spite these assholes. Like that's the mentality you get into.
That's not a bad place to be, but I'll tell you the best thing to do when you get there is just to take a couple of extra steps.
It was her having to deal with that. She's whining and complaining from the couch.
Oh yeah, no. The best thing to do in those situations is to just go ahead and take it forward a couple of steps and say, listen, should I just get my lawyer involved? And that'll usually just make things start moving.
Or it'll make them much pissier.
It can.
It can. Right? Like that was kind
But that's when you just do it and get your lawyer involved.
If you vote in Massachusetts as a libertarian, and that's what you're registered as, right? They register that as independent with a star next to your name, and they didn't know what the frig I star means. Right?
That's not your fault, though. That's theirs.
It's not our fault, but they
managed to find a way to make it.
They did. They did. So I mean, I can kind of understand. The one thing I don't get is when they start talking about voter ID laws as, like, somehow discriminatory, and you're like, so you're telling me black people don't know how to get a driver's license?
That's pure racism of low expectations, and it's disgusting.
It really is super disgusting.
Speaking of racism, did you hear the hot new bars that Joe Biden dropped just this week?
Oh, boy.
What is he racist about now?
Well,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't actually say, because
he slurred two words together, and the best part is that if you read the auto-generated captions for that, it says exactly what you expect it would say in completely inappropriate manner. But it was legitimately slurring two words together.
What were these two words together?
I can't remember what the words were separately, but
what does the caption read? What does the caption read?
Well, imagine he was saying somebody's name, like their last name was Gurr and their first name was Nick. You know, imagine he was saying that person's name.
Like actually a guy who recently got told by Twitch that his own fucking name.
Yeah,
is not allowed
I just
to be
saw that today.
Nick Gerber.
Yes, real Nick Gerber was denied use of his username just today on Twitch.
Now, did Biden have his ghost costume on when he was doing this, or is that just for his cosplay days?
Okay, hold on a second. I have to go find this tweet because I think I even retweeted it. Where someone has like the captions going, and it's
yeah. Oh man, if you've got that, give me a link to it because I would love to put that in Showlinks for everybody.
Here's the Nick Gerber person. That's funny.
Yeah, I remember reading about that earlier today. I'll put that in for everybody as well.
Where the fuck is this? It's me making fun of people talking about shit while they're on their fucking iPhones. Because that's insanely funny. Oh yeah, so these people talking, basically saying that the Hyatt allows Nazi organizations, etc., and white supremacists and so on. Every fucking one of those is on an iPhone. Every criticism is on a fucking iPhone. It's hilarious. The ass backwards thinking that they have to process through their brains, tweet it from an iPhone. Let me just ignore the Uyghurs that died to make this device.
Listen. Not all Uyghurs die. Some are raised. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And besides, if they're dead, they can't give more organs. I mean, and they love giving organs. They love it.
This is true.
It's one of those things. It's like they just, it's one of those kindnesses that they can do to someone to give their organs to them. And that the Chinese government, they're just obliging their wishes. Because they're such good and kind, caring people.
We just need to keep in mind that not all prisoners can care as much as the one who gives them your heart.
Too true. Too true. Too true.
I mean, truly, political prisoners care too, and that is shown by how many heart transplants come out of certain prisons.
Absolutely. It's like, not just are they prisoners of conscience. Maybe they can provide that conscience to the next person that gets that little part of them.
That wasn't shitty. That was straight up Hallmark, man.
It is. I gave you my heart. Thank you so much for supporting Communist China.
This one goes out to those glorious prison guards at the Uyghur death camps. Good work, guys. Enjoy the move on. What ridiculous times we live in.
I can't find the video. It might have gotten taken down.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I know that a lot of that shit gets buried in memory holes as quickly as it can.
Well, you know what? That is actually the most irritating part about dealing with Dems, and probably the thing that switched me off of, being a progressive Democrat, was the fact that they memory hole a lot of their mistakes.
Oh, yeah, so, this is, also, the naming thing is also known as the Scunthorpe problem.
Yes.
For an obvious reason. Where the fuck is this? That video exists. Stupid woman with the fucking bunk bed. Where the hell did it go?
Don't really have any... Oh, No, I don't have anything with the subtitles, but I will find a link to the initial thing itself, if nothing else, because I put one of those out there. Because I like to put out a...
There's just some guy who had the video, and his tweet was just, oh no. And in the video, there are subtitles.
Are there now?
Yeah, and there is the automated closed captioning, and it said exactly what you think it said.
Oh, yeah, okay, I found the original, so I'll make sure, and you better not play the audio, thank fuck. Okay, because I had to cut the section of this podcast. Okay, it didn't play the audio. I'll just go ahead and throw the link in here so that anybody can look that up. I'll throw it in the chat too.
If you guys... the audio. I don't know what you guys are talking about at all.
You should play it in your own free time.
Well, there it is.
I don't have any free time.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I actually work for a living.
Breaking. Biden drops in. What the fuck are you calling this? This wouldn't work.
Oh no, this is my fun time.
Yes. Speaking of compensation, here, what's the grand total investment into our little podcast so far?
I'm not even going to.
$3.
Have we broken the $3 cap?
No, we were at. All said, it's I guess growing organically. It's $3.42 now.
Hell yeah!
I mean
right,
that's.
So I hear that and I can't unhear it when I click that thing. let me actually turn up the volume so you guys can capture this on this.
No. Actually, that's completely unnecessary, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness. But I'll put a link to it in the description.
Sure everybody shares in the joy of Biden.
Well,
every moment of Biden being captured on TV should be shared with everyone who voted for it.
It absolutely should, and I will put this as the top comment.
And what's great about this is it's on repeat. So if you don't catch it the first time,
you have more opportunities.
Yeah, you certainly do. You certainly do. It's there forever.
This is as opposed to him actually saying it on purpose in the chamber in session. Previously, as I believe it was when he was a senator.
There is that.
When
you listen to this clip, it comes to him so naturally. It really does. It's not a word he's never said before.
He's a regular old Colonel Sanders.
Can we be at least reasonably impressed with how the Democrats went from the party of slave owners / mega racist to the party of defending all the black people and I get it. Now they're requesting segregated school systems and segregated this.
Well, it's for the protection.
They changed their position, but they changed.
They sure as shit got better PR.
They really did.
Yeah, they certainly did. Yeah, nowadays
we have to be kind of impressed.
Oh yeah, no, you've got to you do have to respect the grift. They've gone from owning property to but anyway.
I mean, somehow we have an entire political party that literally went from we need school segregation so that the white people aren't injured by the black people to we need school segregation so the black people aren't offended by the white people.
Now you see the funny thing is
there is so much racism buried in that. It's not even funny.
The funniest part is it's not even that it's the same party that did it. It's the same fucking people.
Yeah.
Literally the same fucking people.
Yeah, how long has Nancy Pelosi been in there?
Let's see, Biden's been in politics. He hasn't hit an even 50 yet, but he's close to an even 50, almost 5 fucking decades. He's been in politics.
Yeah, call it 5. It was 47 years before all of this nonsense.
Right.
So
he's gonna be in there 51 years when you actually make it to a full first term.
I mean, it really you have to admire the fact that they have somehow changed the PR from being actual hardcore racist bastards to being like the people who are quote unquote defending everybody else from racism.
Well, you see, they're defenders of the little man and all the black people that haunt them. It's fucking insane.
Absolutely. You don't call it a plantation anymore. You call it a ghetto or project housing.
Or New York City, apparently.
Also, yes. That one's... Well, I mean, they're all kind of subjects there, too, in their own fashion, so I guess it all works out. Running their roles and doing their errands and all that, walking down synagogues and churches and chaining up parks and such, as you do.
I'm surprised they didn't go around snipping the wires around Jewish homes. Because, I mean, that would have immediately been a way for them to get rid of public gatherings out in front lawns.
I'm more impressed.
I almost would have.
They somehow flip the script and have the entire 12% of the black population eating out of their palm of their hands, and you're like, seriously, guys,
Well, if you only
somehow if you sit there and you do all of these things that they're now considering racist, like working hard and showing up to work on time.
Well, the thing is that they concentrate the lies that they tell down to roughly every 2 to 4 years.
Yeah, if you keep the bullshit up too long, people will start noticing.
They make sure that they hype the lies at full turbo autism speeds during years when they aren't in power. And then, they just... The media that's complicit with them just stops covering all the shit that they do during the years of their power. So, that whole 8 years of fucking amnesia that occurred under Obama suddenly ended when Trump decided to run for president. The same way that it's immediately come back as soon as Biden got into power because, hey, we're bombing Syria again, we're probably going to go to a war with Iran. Nobody seems to know this one.
One of the things that has surprised me is that even though they still memory hole a lot of stuff and they aren't as confrontational as they were with Trump, they are still actively going after Biden. Like, they're starting to ask him questions that are
Well,
hard questions.
let's be clear there.
Yeah, this
Kind
needs a
of.
little bit of a caveat.
Certain members of the press pool are. Most of them are still asking him what flavor of ice cream he likes.
Consider you had literally one guy saying, why is it so and I can't remember the exact speech, but there is an actual reporter that goes up to Obama and says, what is it like to be the most amazing man in existence? Right? And he goes on for like 5 minutes sucking the dude's dick. And then all of a sudden, we go to the fact that Biden and his presidency and his press corps gets actual hard questions. And what's really funny is they can't answer it because they were expecting the Obama press corps, right? But one of the downsides is that they went so hard after Trump that they don't know how to turn that off.
Well, you also have Miss Psaki circling herself around and
she ain't no circle back girl.
You know, I've heard a lot of people that see. I wish I paid attention to the press conferences, but I haven't paid attention to the press conferences since Spicer was in there.
Spicier.
Sean Spicier was one of the greatest things that ever happened to that office.
I felt so bad for him when he showed up that one day and he had like a binder full of papers and he's just shaking fistful of documents at these people. I think that was like the press conference where he got kicked out and replaced by what's her name? Daughter of the New Hampshire senator.
Right.
I'm not saying that he was wrong in doing what he was doing. He was actually probably correct in doing what he was doing. But at the same time, it's like the press has won when you're shaking papers at these people. And I distinctly remember, I can't remember, what is her name? What is that, the not McCaney.
Sanders.
Sanders. Oh my God, I loved her going through her press conferences. She was phenomenal. She would go up and she'd just have a PowerPoint and be like, oh, you said that? Well, I remember when you sit there and did this tweet back here.
That was good stuff. Oh, and I've got some breaking news that might even still be breaking by the time people hear this. Pelosi has called the Cuomo sexual harassment allegations credible. So this is going to get really, really spicy.
So to anybody who voted for Biden, please know the Democrats do not have your back, and they will turn at you as soon as it is politically inconvenient for them to do so.
You are all a series of useful idiots. If somehow this message is getting to the people that really could use it. I know it's getting to some people that'll be interested in hearing it, but by God, if you can spread this thing, go for it. It'd be awesome. We're talking about interesting shit here.
This is the kind of thing that, so again, when we start talking about Cuomo, right? Cuomo made a lot of mistakes, but he was carried on the top of the press's shoulders for years because for at least the past year, because he was anti-Trump, right? But the thing is that he sacrificed people's lives, and it is inconvenient to the Democratic Party to do so, and because of that, he is now facing hardcore retribution in the form of Me Too accusations, which somehow didn't surface until well after the inauguration. I want to be very clear, because it wasn't just after the election, because that's when they could have dropped this if they actually thought it was legitimate. But the fact that they waited until he's inaugurated for about a month before they dropped this means that they probably had some questions during the post-election season.
Well, it's all a matter of timing in this sort of thing, and if there was any question that things would be resolved to the right, they couldn't really... You can't abandon any of your allies when you desperately need them. When you have no scruples.
Let's also consider that the capital is still occupied territory right now.
Yeah, there are. We have American troops in a fenced-off and barbed wire-covered Washington, D.C. to this very day that suffer no real credible threat. I mean, we all know what's coming, and it will, but it's not time now, and they're being utterly foolish. So what is this all about? I mean, this posturing does nothing but waste money and piss people off.
Well, I think the reason is that they think that they pushed it to the brink, right? Like,
well, they have. But the timing isn't now.
We're essentially in a game of Super Monkey Ball here, right? The Democrats took the controller and said, hey, let's sit there and turn it to the far left as far as we can and see how that works out. And so they were kind of expecting the ball to roll off and have to deal with, some folks dealing with them. And they didn't. That wasn't really how the right plays. Like,
no.
we're not interested in sitting there and throwing a revolution every 3 minutes just because we feel that, we're not being treated as much as our awesome status deserves. Which is what we're kind of dealing with right now, right? Like, the progressives, they come in and the one fundamental fact that would disarm a progressive is you're not as awesome as you think you are. The problem is...
Oh, God forbid.
Right? So the problem is that the Democrats turned it as far as they could to the left, and they're trying to regain control right now. So they were expecting a mini cultural revolution, and they didn't get it. That's not... Either Republicans are just pussies.
They generally speaking are.
Which is true, yeah. Well,
neocons and rhinos, gonna neocon and rhino.
Yeah, I have yet to see a Republican stand for anything other than themselves. But at the same time, they thought they were going to throw it off the cliff, and they didn't. I don't know how.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, Americans don't really want another revolution right now.
No, not really.
Most people are just expecting one to happen.
Pretty much. That said, everyone's...
Like, a smoldering, quiet one, not like a, bombs bursting in air kind of thing, but...
Yeah, I don't really know exactly what these people were expecting, but this is 2021. I mean, did they expect that everybody was just going to line up on a field or something? No, we're going to have things like Wall Street bets. We're going to have, that's a battle. And they're still fighting. Matter of fact, let me just hop over here.
God,
GameStop is at this very moment $101.74 a share. It's a thing of beauty. It's an absolute thing of beauty.
I really wish I'd shorted it at 200. So I have been trying to. So I'll toss again my Webull links there. Webull is a fantastic platform to trade on. It is a lot better than Robinhood. At the same time, it's I have found that I am not as adept as I would hope at some of the Webull bet stuff. It's they have really done a lot of pump and dumps, and I'm pretty good at pump and dumps. But there's some things that you just don't predict, and you miscalculate horribly, or you're just tired. Do not ever trade when you're tired. That's a bad idea. I have one night the dog so he ate a whole bunch of coconut, and coconut gives dogs GI distress, so he kept me up the entire night. The entire night, and then I was like, all right, I'll sit there and I'll bid on this, and then I was like, oh no. So the pattern day trader rule, the PDT rule, is really annoying. So basically, if you fund an account and you have less than $25,000 in it, you're not allowed to trade in and out of security more than 3 times in a week, which means that you can't take a profit when you think you should take a profit, because otherwise they'll lock your account and shut you down.
Right.
And so I had a couple of these accounts, a couple of these things where I was actually set to go take my profit, and I said, maybe they'll keep on going up, and I'll just take it tomorrow. And then I realized I too late that I made a mistake. But
yeah, do be careful when you're trading. I mean, that's your money, so it's the same as if you're gambling.
Well, it's not. It's not quite gambling.
Well, no, I mean, you should practice as much care.
You should realize that the deck is stacked against you.
Well, the house always wins, as they say.
The house really does always win. The SEC actively sits there and prevents you from making money.
As we're learning day by day.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, this is why crypto is superior.
Absolutely. So it's wise to own some Ethereum, maybe some Doge or Doggy. I don't know what the fuck it's called.
Doggy, goddammit.
I call it Doggy. I don't know who the fuck calls it Doge.
I thought it was Doge.
Idiots.
Yeah.
It's spelled Doggy.
Tim Pool
Doggy.
Tim Pool calls it Doge, right? And you're like, it's Doggy Coin. Its entire symbol is literally a Shiba Inu. It is a Doggy Coin. Like, what the fuck?
Well,
why are people calling it Doge?
Maybe it's a GIF thing.
It literally isn't though. I wish it was that easy. Like, but it's Doggy Coin.
Fair enough. You heard it here from the authorities.
It is.
I am the authority. God damn it.
No,
now you know.
I agree with Craig. I don't always agree with Craig, but when it comes to Dogecoin, I agree with Craig. It's fucking called Dogecoin. Who the fuck calls it Doge?
Well,
Shit,
now you know.
That's who calls it Doge.
Knowing is half the battle. So, I hope I don't get some sort of copyright infringement for that. I don't imagine so.
I'm pretty sure G.I. Joe is so old that you won't.
No, dude, you have not seen the Mickey Mouse curve, have you?
The what?
Oh, yeah. Have they updated their copyright laws yet? Since
I don't know.
Steamboat
it's
Willie...
called the Mickey Mouse curve. Every time Mickey Mouse comes close to going out of copyright, they find a way to extend it. So Mickey Mouse is still covered under copyright because Disney and Co. have found a way to push and lobby for laws to be changed.
Okay, so January 1st, 2024 is when it comes up next. So keep your eyes peeled.
Usually they produce a brand new IP starring Mickey Mouse.
No.
That's how they do it.
No, it's not. It literally is called the Mickey Mouse curve. Look it up. It's how they've gotten laws adjusted over time, where the original Mickey Mouse is still covered under copyright.
But they usually have to produce a brand new IP starring Mickey Mouse in order for that to happen.
Well, no, anything falls out of copyright after a time. Now, these later things...
It is the lifetime of is currently the lifetime of the person who produces it, plus 70 years. If you didn't know, and everything's covered under automatic copyright. So every time you sneeze into a tissue, for the rest of your life, plus 70 years, that snot mark is covered by copyright.
Thank you, Disney.
And within the next couple of years, you're probably going to see a huge lobbying effort from Disney to try and get copyright laws changed.
Yeah.
Because you have to think of the little guy and how the starving artist profits off of their hard labor, and not the slave labor to the AA mafia. That would be the Recording Industry Association of America and the Movie Producer Association of America.
I'm gonna have to take a look at this Mickey Mouse curve because I thought there's a variety of different ways.
It is lifetime of the author plus 70 years, and that currently covers Mickey Mouse until a couple years from now.
And it was, what was it, originally like 20 years at the very beginning?
It was the same as a patent. It was like 5 or 10 years or whatever. Yeah, 20 years is fine.
Well, it was. You're right that it was originally 5 or 10 years, and then they extended it to 20 years, which affected all patents.
Right. It was originally the exact same as patents because it was meant to be the useful arts. Like, copyright used to be something you had to register for. Automatic copyright changed that entirely. Like, this is something I used to rage about in the Tech Dirt comments section.
Yeah, and it may have done ill for us in the end, because there's a lot of good iteration that could have been done that literally can't because it's somebody else's copyright.
Talking about why is it that they keep on resurrecting this fucking shit that is stuff from our childhood and then trying to sell it back to us? The answer is that they can't come up with any brand new ideas, and so part of it is that they can just stay within this IP forever. But last I checked, I could have sworn that it was a case of if you produce a brand new IP, so you see this with Gone with the Wind.
No, this is how you do things like with like drug patents. You can change the drug the ingredients just by proportion slightly. You know, make 55%, 56%, that kind of thing, and you can get a whole new patent out of it. With copyright, every time you do something new, like you can't. So you can register copyright and renew a registration like once or twice. But that's not cost effective. Instead, automatic copyright covers you already, and registering gives you a couple more ways of doing things, like going after people who have violated your copyright. But in general, because it's automatic, it's your entire lifetime plus 70 years. If you do something else,
really?
any new recording of something is a new copyright that is issued.
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
what
the
I was
original.
saying.
It's not an extension of the original. So,
but at the same time,
the original is still your lifetime plus 70 fucking years.
You would have to produce a brand new work, right? That is a new IP using the same characters in order to extend it indefinitely.
And even still, you wouldn't actually be doing that.
It's a new IP.
They produced, after Gone with the Wind, because that was expiring copyright, they produced a brand new IP, a brand new book, with the same characters, and as long as the same characters are covered, then all of a sudden Gone with the Wind stays within copyright.
It actually doesn't work quite like that, no.
Really?
No. No, copyright law is a little bit weird.
Well,
and
again,
like once you put it into the domain, it's it's your life plus 70 years as of now.
Once it's fixed form, it's lifetime plus 70 years.
So
that means that you can't reissue new IP in fixed form after you're dead and extend it even further. So your life, when it ends, everything you've ever done gets an additional 70 years of protection under copyright.
So basically what you want to do is look at when Steamboat Willie came out. So what happens there is when that finally does go, when they're not able to push it any farther, which may be this time. It's possible. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
It might not be. And they've been saying for a couple times it's going to be this time, but we'll see what Disney can pull off. Although they don't have the power they once did, so.
Well, they certainly still have purchased enough representation in Congress.
Undoubtedly. And being a member of the entertainment media complex, they're bipartisan in their power in that respect, so absolutely.
I'm sure they're going to have enough.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Just watch for Steamboat Willie. But what that would mean in the grand scheme of things is that Steamboat Willie-based original Mickey Mouse design could be freely used, and all the assets from Steamboat Willie, for that same matter, could all be freely used by anyone for any purpose.
Yeah.
And now, any further iteration, like the very next cartoon, say it came out the next year, well, that'd be 2025 that one would be up. And then you would be able to use those assets for anything. And that's basically how that would roll. And then, as you would get up to The Lion King, obviously that's going to be some while from now.
If you're wondering how, these assets came under company control and why it's not just the lifetime of the illustrator, that's part of the contract you sign to work for a company like that. You sign away your rights to these things. I have a patent that'll be coming out at some point. I can't go into details much about it. I think we covered this a couple weeks ago in post or pre-show stuff.
Yeah.
At a certain point, a patent that comes out, and my rights to that patent, I've signed over to who I was working for, because that's the contract I signed, and then the thing I signed to send the rights over, I'm already contractually obligated to sign in the first place if I want the patent to go through, because the institution is the entity that is pursuing the patent on my behalf.
Which, by the way, is one
totally
of the
normal.
reasons why STEM does not advance as fast as we'd like, and we end up getting these.
The Bayh-Dole Act is stupid. It's just that the Bayh-Dole Act priced a lot of inventions out of the market.
Essentially, what ends up happening is that you need to work for a company, and anything that you produce for that company that could be considered an independent like IP, for whatever it may be, is owned by that company that you produced it for while you were working.
Well, you assign them rights kind of automatically is what happens.
You can get around it with some stuff if you don't have something that is specific to like the field that you're working in, but then you'd have to go to court and prove that it's not specific to the field that you're working in.
Now, the more important thing in especially at my area and my current progression along things, like it's more important to have my name on stuff than it is to be making royalties and so on. So I'm not like, it's nothing I'm upset about. This is something I knew would be the deal well in advance because it's the contract I signed.
Yep.
And I'd already gotten a taste of that in undergrad because I did have to sign the Gatorade clause. So thank you, Dr. Cade, for making everybody realize that patents are important.
Well, I mean, he's not the only one. There's half a dozen different people who employ this, but this is actually pretty common in STEM.
Yeah.
If you produce something that is unique and individual and it is in the line of your work, you don't get to see any royalties of it. You might get a bonus from your company.
It depends on the contract you sign, right? So the way that the institution I dealing with this does it is they take 50% of the royalties and the other 50% is distributed among the inventors, depending on how they've agreed ahead of time to split things up.
I mean, if you know what you're getting into, that doesn't seem unreasonable.
It's not, because a lot of times you can produce an IP through
It's pretty generous.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, you've got access to facilities that are generally going to be well beyond your own means. And that's,
right, exactly. And
that's part of the deal.
End up banking on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why a lot of programmers end up in a similar situation. They'll be working at a high-end business and any kind. I know that's how it is at Microsoft. I don't know how it is at a lot of places, but I know a lot of the works at Microsoft were put into that kind of contract as well.
It's pretty normal. Like you will sign something, and if you're in STEM, right? If you're in STEM, you will sign a contract very early on in your employment, which is basically right as you get in the door, that anything you produce at that time is owned by other people besides you.
And you have to. So that's the thing is, you have to be careful with them because sometimes a company will overreach and say that for the entirety of your time that you're employed, anything that you produce of any value as to be determined by their own intellectual property department. So not in your best interest to start with.
Actually, it can extend beyond the time in which you are employed with that company.
Right. So you have to read these things and understand that after a certain point, they're just raw dog fucking you in the ass. So, if it's beyond the hours that you're spending, like if you think up something interesting that has nothing to do with the company, and you do it on the side as a side gig, and they come after you, that kind of stuff should not be covering your contract, and that's the kind of things you're supposed to be looking for before you sign anything and say, hey, do you mind if I take another day to think about this one?
So do always read over your contracts. It's always worth it to at least give it a skim, and if it's something bigger than signing up for a new email box, then definitely give it a real proper once-over. I mean,
if it's something like this, it's okay to say, can I go talk to my lawyer? Even if you don't have a lawyer, you can find one after you say something like that.
It is, however, still fairly normal.
Yeah. Well, if anything that you produce on company time with company resources, absolutely it's typical for you to give up ownership of that. Because it's entirely in their field.
It's also typical that if you produce something that is adjacent to your work in any way, shape, or form.
Like inspired or informed by it,
yes.
Fine. But if you're talking about, say you're a steel worker, and you do designs for like you do CAD modeling for new parts, for engine parts, and say you come up with a computer game that you've written in your spare time, the company shouldn't get a fucking cent of that.
No, and they won't.
But you also shouldn't sign a contract that says they should, if that's something that you've thought of ahead of time.
And there are a lot of places that will take advantage of you in that way,
right.
So that's why it's wise to just at least be wary, give everything a proper once-over. Especially when it's like your own life and
contracts you sign,
stuff you're dealing with.
And if you don't abide by the contracts you sign, then you shouldn't be signing them in the first place. So this would apply to, say, everybody who's bitching about student debt right now.
Also that, yeah, you know. Speaking of, how's the $50,000 that Joe was promising to forgive in student debt for everybody? Has that gone through yet?
Man, I wish.
That is. I would go and take out a student loan specifically for that.
Yeah.
I mean, why
so I
wouldn't
can
you?
get some of my tax dollars back, just to be clear on that one.
I mean, he's never going to agree to that. He's
Right.
never going to agree to that.
Yeah, to anyone that, if there's somehow anyone that's listening to this, or in the future that's listening to this, that thought that there was any possibility of Joe Biden, like, giving all this money back to the people, I don't know what to tell you. How could you have imagined
How
that?
he's handling $2,000? You want $50?
There's two parts to this. One, I think that anybody who wants to demand student loan repayment programs from somebody external to themselves is it's essentially admitting that that college doesn't pay for itself. That college as a whole doesn't pay for itself. And this goes back to kind of the same thing we talk about with masks. There is a difference between saying masks and specifying things. So when we start talking about STEM degrees pay for themselves.
Yeah, there's a difference between going to college.
College does not pay for itself. If you take a gender studies degree and you come to me and say, "Oh my God, I can't make any money," yeah,
I'm just gonna laugh.
And what do you want me?
What exactly did you expect? Did you
Right.
think there was a big market for something that doesn't really exist other than the mind of closet racists?
When we start talking about these things, that is an implicit admission of this thing. That being said, I also do understand how some people can turn around and say that this is something that we should have done earlier. Because in the 2008-ish financial crisis, there's a whole bunch of people, myself included, who are competing with jobs against people with 20-plus years experience. Because the United States fundamentally fucked the economy so hard that people who were just trying to enter the market and get a job couldn't, even if you had an appropriate degree.
Well, it's partly because of the way that dollars are generated. It initiates from the spreadsheet with M0, and then with M1 you get all the other kind of holdings and loans and so on. But then after that, it becomes debt dollars. And when everybody calls in a debt, the dollar pool shrinks so hard, there's no money to loan out.
And it doesn't help that we have basically fiat currency
the economic
either.
Contraction you saw in 2008.
Well, yes.
Which is annoying because the opposite problem is happening because of last year. M0 doubled last year, which means 75% of all dollars that's in circulation today came into existence last year.
Yep. Which by
means
the way,
that you should be expecting some hardcore inflation this decade.
Oh, there really is.
And that's partly the reason by the way, that Bitcoin stayed so high. Is that's the capital flush between markets trying to find a way to settle in. Eventually, that inflation is going to trickle down past stock markets, past companies, and into your pocket.
In previous episodes, I would go out and buy Truly Pineapple 20-ounce cans. And those Truly Pineapple 24-ounce cans. And those Truly Pineapple 24-ounce cans cost me about $2.50 2 to 3 weeks ago. They are now $3.29.
Oh my God.
That, motherfuckers, is inflation. Our money is literally becoming worthless as we look at it. So,
you're watching it happen.
The next few years.
Yeah, so
find a a non-fiat asset and invest in it.
So
literally anything is better than money.
A thing to point out here, this is largely due to the fractional reserve system, and that's the way that the debt dollar is created. Every dollar that they take in, they can loan out 9 additional dollars. Fine, that's just that inflates the currency supply, but the fundamental currency that cannot be that all that starts from is M0. Those are the dollars in the spreadsheet at the Fed. Yep. And so they doubled that last year because of the pandemic and the markets. And they largely did this to keep the stock market going, not realizing that, like, they're going to fuck us in 2 or 3 years. In the way that your drink got fucked just in the last month.
Right. So when we start talking about this, like the things that we debate in terms of whether we should lock down or shouldn't lock down, and how we should deal with lockdowns and not lockdowns,
right?
The response the United States had was, hey, let's sit there and give everybody money so they stay in place. They did a half-assed lockdown, and then they did a whole bunch of funding of that lockdown, most of which, by the way, didn't actually come to us. You take a look at things like the omnibus spending bill, which was fucking retarded. You should not turn around and spend money on foreign countries when your own country is having problems.
That's the thing. Right? Like, here's the thing. So was it $10 million for studying gender dynamics, or no, giving gender
Pakistani gender studies?
Yeah, that's it. Basically, just lecturing Pakistanis on how they shouldn't be so sexist.
Right.
What the fuck is wrong with people? Like, who the hell lobbied for that in the first place? Like, I don't even know of a gender studies dipshit in the U.S. that was thinking, oh, but what about Pakistan?
This is not something that is done in this one bill that we actually caught it in. The way these omnibus spending bills pass is these are things that are added, and then they just continue to fund them ad infinitum because nobody actually reads the fucking bill. They just pass it. This is entirely based on your congressional representatives being dipshits, and always being lazy dipshits.
Again,
which, by the way, is why we should have term limits.
But I've got to ask, who was, like, what gender studies urchin hanging out in an ivory tower was sitting there staring at their navel and then immediately, like, it just popped into their head, but Pakistan. Like, I get it if they, like, you know, look slightly to the left and then see a man standing in the far corner and go, our state, our whole fucking country must immediately go under some sort of re-education. Fine, at least you're thinking slightly local. Like,
you know,
how the fuck did Pakistan get involved? It baffles me.
So anybody who wants to remember the actual, like, going back to November, the way this shit works is it's 10% for the big guy, right? So what ends up happening is our representatives get lobbied by foreign interests who will sit there and fund their campaigns, and they will use as a function of the money that we send them as a result of our representatives voting for this money to be sent there, they will use a portion of that money to kick back to them.
You know what?
The reason our congressional representatives are worth millions of dollars, despite the fact that they're supposed to be public servants, is largely because all of them get a kickback from everybody else outside the United States from directing United States.
I think I got it. It must have been that some politician got a phone call from Karachi about a duct cleaning service or an auto what was it? Not auto insurance, an auto warranty expiring, and then it must have been like someone on the other end of the line with a very thick, fun accent must have been telling him all about the woman they banged the night before. And they went, "Oh my God, that's so sexist. Let's go ahead and re-educate all of Pakistan."
Maybe.
Possible.
Maybe.
You know, well, after they got their ducts cleaned and, of course, paid for the new warranty on their car that doesn't exist.
I mean, you've got to spend the money somewhere, or you won't get it next quarter.
It boggles the mind. Like, this, like, just allows it like 5,500 pages, and it's like, fuck it, let's pass it. And in the middle of it is buried. This shit's buried in there. It's amazing. And like, I don't know if term limits are actually going to fix that.
No, at this point it's kind of endemic.
There's no physical way they could have read. There's no physical way they could have read that bill before passing. And they had one of these. They had several under these under Obama too, where it was like 1,100 pages.
Right, the number of people that are going to insist on actually reading the bill the first time versus the number of people who are comfortable just passing.
I think it should be read word for word in the chamber. It should be read word for word in the chamber. They should have to.
I would take no issue with that. Not at all.
I am a firm believer that they should not be allowed to vote on something that is proposed for a number of days equal to a certain number of pages per day. Assuming that based on them and whatever, all of their other the other stuff that they have to deal with, they should have to actually,
give them time to actually peruse the bills they have put up?
Exactly.
That sounds completely unreasonable for Washington.
That is the response that I think that we should have, is that if you want to pass something, before you can have an actual vote on it, we need to allocate the appropriate amount of time to our representatives so that they can read it.
Well, I think that reading it
you produce a 3,500-page bill, and you say, hey, it requires 10 pages per day. That's the maximum we assume on any individual bill, because you have multiple bills per day, that you will have time to read. And all of a sudden, your 3,500-page bill will require 350 days between the time that it is submitted and the time that it is passed before it actually goes into effect. And we really would just end up winning on this.
I think that it would be funnier though. Well, not even just funnier. It'd be more practicable as far as the record goes to have some schmuck up there at the front droning for 12 hours a day in and day out in session.
You know what?
Just reading the fucking bill.
Let's combine the two strategies. So
I think that's reasonable.
The internet died. Crap. Well, let me make a note of the time.
About things.
Okay, so my internet died for a second there. Apologize. So.
That was the best part of the whole night. So.
God damn it!
Whatever. Screw you, Evan. God.
No, really? Okay. I thought it died again just now as you said that. Man.
I really just don't have time for another 3 hours.
What was the last thing you heard?
Oh, no. It died like at the hour 51-minute mark, and I got back on in 40 seconds, so it wasn't...
That was an important 40 seconds, sir.
That was the most important 40 seconds.
Not only were we
scrap this whole thing.
Not only were we agreeing, but it was hilarious.
It was.
Well, hey, it's better than literally all of my audio being gone this time.
Craig and I actually agree on almost everything that we talk about.
Fair enough, yeah.
I don't want to say that we pretend to disagree. We just disagree on minor points. Yeah, that's kind of the thing.
That's kind of what we're due, though. So
this is like when Craig and I actually, when we get offline, like we sit down and we talk about these things. It's like two fucking nerds debating which captain in Star Trek is the best one. That's really what this is like, right? Both of us agree that both captains are amazing, but we have vehement disagreements on which one's the best.
Yeah, but Picard and Kirk, they weren't exactly equal. Okay.
Exactly right. Yeah, because Picard was better.
Yeah, okay. I don't actually have an opinion on this, but whatever.
Well,
use the Force, Luke.
You know what? I always love to find the people who are hardcore Star Wars nerds or hardcore Star Trek nerds. Like, don't get me wrong, I'll watch both. I prefer Star Trek to Star Wars. But I always be like, that was when they, you go to somebody who's got like a Star Wars tattoo and you be like, oh yeah, did you see that time that the Enterprise took down the AT-AT? And they're like,
no, and then you combine that with the Lord of the Rings shit.
Oh yes, that's the best.
Dude, I remember when Elrond totally took out the Death Star in that one episode of Enterprise.
Which do you think was the best, Captain Kirk or Captain Picard? I think Captain Gollum was the best.
It's also fun if you can throw people for a really deep meta loop. Maybe throw in some Firefly on a or better still, throw a Quantum Leap reference at him.
You know what?
Or what you do is you do brown shirt versus brown coat, and then you completely confuse them.
I am really sad that Disney is actually contemplating starting up Firefly again.
They're gonna screw it up.
It really is.
The fan-made brown coats thing was like such a good thing. They even had Nathan Fillion involved.
Did it really?
That last I heard, that they'd gotten him to be somewhat involved, and he was cool with it.
Well, I mean, so there was a time where they did an interview with him, and he said that if he had the money, he'd buy the rights, but it's $7 million to buy the rights.
Whew.
And it like he couldn't afford that, plus like the cost to initiate an entire show.
Yeah.
And he can't do that. But yeah, Disney has acquired the rights, and they're going to launch Firefly. And you know what's really sad is I just watched it. Like I watched it from the beginning to the end, and it was truly an amazing series.
It was.
Like,
here's the thing: you have a strong female lead. You have multiple strong female leads, but they're organically there. They're not like shoehorned in. And you know what's going to happen? Disney's going to take over, and then suddenly everything they do is going to have to be highlighted. Oh, but it's because they're a woman.
Well, see, actually, this is a perfect time for them. What they can do is they can segue Kathleen Kennedy out of Star Wars into that. It's like, well, she's perfect. She's big on the feminism, the girl power.
And maybe the segue can just, like, consume her from the knees up to the chin, and then nobody will have to deal with her again.
First off,
that would not be a terrible problem.
Anything that she's in, I will happily watch. Let's be entirely honest about that. She's amazing. But, whoever was Kaylee was awesome. Right. Like you had the engineer of the ship, the person who knows all of this fucking shitty ass, weird ass mechanical parts, and she's a fucking chick. And then you had.
Well, it's not the best. She's extremely young. She's basically just been doing shit since she was like 5 or whatever.
Right. She's not even. It's
just hilarious. She has no idea what the fuck's going on, but she knows if I bang this with a hammer, it works.
Yeah, that was the best part about her. She's like,
it's a spaceship.
Technically, like when they did their like background character reveal, the entire reason that she was hired was she was banging the mechanic when he couldn't figure out how the engine works, and she's like, oh yeah, this thing's wrong, and I don't even think the part needs to be there, and she just hooks up the hose, and you're like, yeah, you're good to go now. I mean, I just like you had that, you had what's her name? The second in command there. I can't remember what her name is.
Right.
A little too far out for me to even say.
It was really a good series of female leads. It was Adam Baldwin being Adam Baldwin. Adam Baldwin is not I mean, he is as much an actor as he is a character. They pretty much just insert him into different shows. Yeah. And he plays the same character in each show that he's in.
Yeah, I'll be in my bunk. Okay.
That was such a great show. And all the way through Serenity, even. I don't even mind that the pilot died. Like, I'm okay with that. Because he wasn't the strongest character.
Half a second.
I see how it is.
Yeah,
so during this
period
of half a second, let's just fully admit that Craig agrees with everything that I say from here on out.
I'd have to leave that to his own devices.
Nope.
Couldn't say.
Nope, that's part of the agreement. When he doesn't show up, everything that I say is 100% correct, and he can't dispute it in any way, shape, or form.
I don't know. We'll have to.
That's great.
I'm sure you do. Oh,
that's how
I actually.
IH.
That's probably smart, though. I mean, if we're being honest here.
I have legitimately told my boss and IH that if they don't show up to my scopings for the work that I'm doing, that they are implicitly agreeing to everything that I write down.
Oh, no, in that case, that's actually probably the very best idea. I mean, considering...
You were invited and you didn't care, therefore what I'm doing is correct.
Well, I mean, just look at it as legal proceeding. If they didn't show up, then they obviously don't have any position to defend, therefore nothing to be concerned with.
That's exactly right.
But I actually have...
You get pissy about that after the fact.
I do actually have one interesting thing, though, that I do want to close on, which is really cool, brand new news, which is, if I'm to understand the size of the discs that they're proposing here, they're about the size of discs that we know now, like CDs, DVDs, but about 700 terabytes.
Yeah. So the one thing that I will offer that we've run into lately, especially with graphics processing, if anybody who's been really into tech for a while and been building their own computer, they've noticed that there hasn't really been a lot of advancement, whether it be smartphones or whether it be actual physical computers. And that's because as much as we have Ohm's Law, which is the doubling of computer power every so often.
Moore's Law.
Moore's Law, sorry, whatever. Same thing. Same thing.
No, not at all.
Actually, no.
Not in the slightest.
Whatever. I don't give a shit. Some fucking dude who deals with electricity. Who gives a shit? Right? I'm gonna call it
Coulomb's Law.
That's exactly right. Coulomb's Law.
They all boil down to the same thing.
You know
what? It has nothing to do with economics.
Let's say it's Rutherford's Law.
Christ, dude.
The
it's Boyle's Law, man. Because it's boiling my blood.
Yes, that's exactly right. So the bottom line is that we're starting to run into a point with computer chips where in order to get them smaller and smaller, we're actually dealing with quantum mechanics. And we're having problems introduced from quantum mechanics.
I actually wrote a paper on this in undergrad for my materials class. And before the high K gates, which would be the hafnium gates, which allowed us to go down sub 20 nanometer, 25 nanometer, the way it was described was electrons were raining through the band gap. So you actually get to the point where electrons can quantum tunnel across, and your distinction between on and off becomes nothing, which is bad because that's how digital stuff works.
So for those who don't understand what we're talking about, I deal with in my area we have the nuclear labs as one major employer, but the second thing that we have is Global Foundries, which is one of the larger chip manufacturers in the world. And so one of their major factories is out where we are, so I end up having...
That makes your Ohm's Law shit even more infuriating. Just need to make sure that you know that.
I'm okay with that, right? It's some dude who said something. The bottom...
It's Henry Kissinger's law.
Yes. No. It is Reynolds' Law.
Yes. No.
Yes. Some dude said something at some time. That's all I really
At one point, a butterfly flapped or farted or something, and
close enough, right? So,
yeah.
So in any case, I do have Global Foundries here. So I end up talking to a lot of people who do nanochip stuff, and one of the problems that we're having with some of the 7 nanometer architecture, so 7 nanometer, basically when we start talking about chips and chip design, the Moore's Law was originally what it was, and it was how many resistors you can fit onto a chip, and that will determine.
Well, it was the lowest, it was the optimal price point tracked over time, and it had to do with
whatever.
It was the curve. There's actually a curve, and it was the bottom of the curve that moved.
So the bottom line was that they could fit more resistors on a chip, and if they can fit more resistors on a chip, then they can turn around and decrease the actual cost of the chip, which means you get more computing. I thought it was mostly resistors.
Transistors.
Is it transistors?
Yeah. Because they transist, as in go on and off. Resistors just resist. Much like Democrats.
In any case,
they're wastes of energy.
What we've moved into in terms of chip processing is photoresist and various microparts are printed on the chip. And so this is actually done by basically taking a silicon wafer, which is completely and totally dust-free, otherwise it shits the bed, and then running it through a laser, which is tuned to a specific nanometer of light, and then putting a photoresist compound in that thing, and when you basically take essentially a picture and you flash it onto this disk. And so that is how we build our microchips.
I'm going to have to go here in a second. I hate to be that buzzkill.
No worries. I was actually wanting to close out on this article about these, this.
Okay, well, by, like, in a second, I unfortunately mean, like, nowish. More than my normal second.
This woman is calling via Skype.
Close enough.
My woman's already gone to bed.
Well, anyway, look, I just want to say, like, I'm gonna be unless I'm on the good drugs and somehow zombie conscious, I'm gonna be out next weekend, and then I may or may not be back the following weekend.
We gotta do a show when you're like half.
Look, if I can stand having the headset on, I'll try it.
Good. Excellent.
All right. If for some reason that gives me breakthrough pain, I'm not going to be able to do it. But you'll know because there'll be gibberish in the text messaging.
Understood.
Awesome.
We will all be hoping for the best. So
sounds like fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Be well. Be safe. Talk to you soon.
All right. Later, guys.
So what I was going through is we are getting smaller and smaller components, and that is largely due to the amount of resistors that we can fit on a chip. I mean, transistors, resistors, whatever, right? In this case, they actually basically take a compound and they put it on a silicon disk, and they flash an image to it with a laser that is designed to emit a specific wavelength frequency of light, as all lasers are. And they map out, based on the image on this chip, exactly where those circuits are. And that's how we've been able to get smaller and smaller chip sizes outside of building actual physical resistors. It's a chemical compound. The problem that we've had when we start doing this is that we start running into quantum tunneling, as Craig said. And basically what that is essentially electrons hop between where they're supposed to be to where they're not supposed to be. And so we're actually getting to kind of the point where we're running into a problem with the physics of our technology, whereas previously Moore's law operated on actual technology reductions based on kind of what he observed with economic patterns in technology. So when we start talking about this data storage at the nanoscale, it's actually very impressive if they're able to pull it off, because when you start dealing with the folks who are dealing with these chips and the ability to imprint on these chips, we start talking about architecture and the actual size of the architecture, and I think it's the 12 nanometer is what they're predominantly operating on right now. I think that's what it is. Don't quote me on that.
I actually couldn't say because I haven't kept up with the most current generation of chips.
Literally a phone call, if it was a reasonable time of night to call somebody, I could give you an answer on that, because I know people who work on the line. But that has not been a problem, and they kind of got that to work. But when you start getting into the 7 nanometer scale, I think it's 12 to 7. I think that's what it is. It's like a half scale reduction. They have the equipment that can theoretically do it, but they haven't been able to actually build these chips stably enough, right? And this is with all kinds of clean rooms and everything else. So the fact that they're able to sit there and start talking about getting to 175 zettabytes is very, very impressive in terms of overall data.
Oh, that's the scale that they're expecting for, like, the amount in the world by 2025. No, what they're talking about is making a 700 terabyte disk.
I mean, that's still very impressive.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a disk that's in the standard form factor that we're used to for optical disks, but 700 terabytes.
Yeah, that's still really impressive to pull with a Blu-ray, right? Because they're doing this with technology that has existed for years. Granted, we kind of went from Blu-ray discs as like a thing in the late 2000s, early 2010s, to all of a sudden no longer using that technology and everybody's streaming everything. So that's a separate question. But Blu-ray, one of the reasons they were able to do it is that they have a much shorter wavelength, and that was why they were able to burn more data on each disc. And it was, back in the day, 25 gigabytes for a Blu-ray disc. They're able to get 700 terabytes. That's pretty damn impressive.
And yes, it does. It says that it uses a inexpensive continuous wave lasers.
I mean, that's at the end of the day, all of laser technology is pretty cheap for what we have. Like it's pretty uniform across the field. That is pretty cheap for what we have, and all we have to do is fine tune the light. Most of the effort that goes into any sort of rewrite capacity or imaging capacity with a laser comes down to the actual optics involved in it and how clean you can keep the environment that it's stored in.
Oh, of course.
When we start talking about storing 700 terabytes on a Blu-ray disc, that's kind of, or what is it? Sorry, 12 centimeter optical disc.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. Now, I don't think this is the kind of thing that you're going to have available to your computer tower simply because you have dust. And dust is a problem when it comes to things of this wavelength. Like a dust particle, when you start talking about storing 700 terabytes on 12 centimeters, right? That dust is going to be a major problem. You get like a little 7 micrometer string on there, and it's going to sit there and disrupt your data, and you're no longer going to have the output that you were expecting.
Yeah, it would. It'd have to be like the old school laser discs that had their own container, basically, or you'd have to have like a multi-stage way of inserting it. Like it'd have to go into a cleaner before it even went into a drive.
Now, one of the things that kind of surprises me is given the advancement in solid-state technology, why they would be pursuing optical storage. That's the one thing I don't understand. So for people who don't really understand, we kind of, one of the reasons we've abandoned optical discs, you don't really, most people do not use CDs or DVDs or Blu-ray discs anymore, and that's partially because the physical media became essentially more expensive and more tedious than just storing it in solid-state media. And even then, like, solid-state media has significantly reduced its overall cost per unit storage, and solid-state media is largely an electronically charged media, which will last forever and a day, and the physical charge and discharge cycles are what allows you to store data. And it's become so cheap that that's kind of what we're using for the most part. We very rarely use, I suppose some people probably use traditional hard drives with physical, storage sites, but we've really moved away from optical technology because it's been kind of tedious to use. So I'm kind of surprised by this.
Well, I don't know. I guess they were doing some experiments and found something interesting happened. So.
Well, I mean, you read this and it says that the optical disk storage capacity is still typically limited to a few terabytes, which is kind of normal. And this might also be write-only technology, which is different from read-write capacity. Read-write is
I would have to imagine it would be, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, but when we start talking about, is the American consumer going to go back to having CDs and DVDs? I don't really believe it. So I'm seeing this thing, and it's talking about write technology, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting that they can start storing that amount of money, or that amount of data, in a very, very small size. Like 12 centimeters is roughly, it's like 2.54 centimeters per inch. So you're talking about and I'm assuming that's diameter, although they don't tell you whether it's a radius or a diameter or anything like that. I'm assuming that we're probably looking at a 4-inch disc, maybe a 6-inch disc.
Yeah, so pretty much the same form factor we're used to.
Pretty close to it, right? Like they're not specific to it, but that's probably pretty close to it. Getting to 700 terabytes would be very, very impressive. Now, again, this all says that it's writing capacity, not a read-write capacity, so you can't just start changing that. That's not going to be the same kind of thing as a hard drive or a server or any of the others. These other data storage formats, which are much more useful, maybe.
Now that said, if you're dealing with storage of this magnitude that's just a disk, there's no reason to be so worried about not being able to update it.
Yes and no. It all depends on the time required to write that amount of information.
That's absolutely a fair point, actually.
So the one thing that they don't talk about is they don't talk about how long it takes to write that kind of information. So the smaller scale you go, you might have a 700 terabyte disk that you can read write a 6-inch, let's say a CD or a DVD that you can write 700 terabytes on. That sounds really impressive until all of a sudden you realize that it's going to take you, 10 hours to do.
Yeah, let's say it's as fast as a tape backup, so yeah, maybe not so reasonable.
So, but you start talking about, SSD storage or even some of the newer forms. I guess it's NVRAM, I think is what they call it. But it's basically a modified form of SSD storage. You're starting to talk about read-write capacities which are substantially higher than a single laser point on a disk. And that's another reason why we moved away from Blu-rays and CD and DVD players. Those of us who have, I think I still have I've got a DVD read-write capable drive.
Oh, I've got a Blu-ray drive, as a matter of fact.
If you want to do it, it's going to be hours to fill that disk up.
They are not the fastest things. But
they are not.
But that's something you consider. I mean, it's just a part of it. Like my main hard drive on this box is one of the M2 slot, whatever the new high-speed IDE slots for them. I've got just a one.
The PCIe slots.
Yeah, I've got my main hard drive on there is on a PCIe slot. It's just 1 terabyte, but I've got a 12 terabyte hard drive that I keep all the everything else on. It's got a decent cache and everything else, but it's a traditional hard drive, so it literally takes a moment to spin up, and that's just kind of a cost of doing business. I mean, if I want that kind of storage and I want it at a reasonable price, and I want modularity, that's just a price I pay. When I go to record this session, as a matter of fact, I go to record it first. I give it a minute to not a minute. I give it about 5 seconds to spin up. Then I'm recording proper. I mean, it's the same for when I do my radio show every week too. It's one of those things that you would just have to plan around and understand. It wouldn't be unreasonable. It's just you'd have to kind of adjust for that again, and that's something we've gotten out of the habit of.
Well, and we have. So when we start talking about things like SSD drives, that was actually one of the things for Chromebooks, which a lot of people have nowadays. And Chromebooks, that was actually something when I was with the initial Chromebook launch. And the Chromebook launch, they had one that was a traditional hard drive and one that was a non-hard drive, and I can guarantee so it was basically our Samsung versus our Acers, right? It was actually literally how it broke down because we only had 2 at the time. And our Samsungs would boot up almost instantly, and our Acers would take, a minute. It wasn't crazy long, but between the two, our Samsungs had this very, very super tiny, like 10 gig SSD, whereas our Acers had a 100 or 200 gigabyte SSD, or I think it was might have been more than that. I can't remember the exact original storage capacity of the original Acer Chromebooks. But you'd have this one, and then you try to demonstrate the boot up capability because the software is substantially faster. And the Samsung, you hit the power button and it was good to go. And the Acer would boot up, and all of a sudden everybody would buy the Samsung. So we've kind of moved to a position where most people are used to buying SSDs, whether they know it or not. And they're not used to having to do read-write capacity for larger storage space. I've got a 2 terabyte SSD drive that I just picked up that I have to still install. Given the time, because my current SSD is 500 gigs and that's expired, but 2 terabytes of SSD is only like $100, $200 to buy and put into your drive. So when we start talking about that, an SSD boots up almost instantly, whereas a multi-terabyte hard drive is your traditional shutdown, startup, 5 to 10 minute cycle, go grab a cup of coffee kind of thing. So we're kind of spoiled there, and when we start talking about optical drives, we're talking about kind of returning to that long long time to save anything, long time to boot anything.
Well, this is also relative, too. You know, like I said, my long time of wait is 5 seconds. Now, this would be obviously longer to burn. Well, I don't know if you'd even say burn a disk in this case, but to write the disk, it's going to take longer to fill the thing up.
It is.
And that's, you know, that's just the nature of the beast kind of thing. But, you know, people, I mean, aside from weird folks like myself that legitimately just don't mind putting a little bit of extra time for something that's better suited to the task, you know, people can get used to it. And there are people that, to this day, use MP3 players and not their phone or their iPad or what have you, you know, something dedicated.
What?
There's still a good market for that sort of thing, and not even just hipsters.
I'm not sure if that market is really true anymore, because not only are we spoiled by the time associated with SSDs versus SSDs and you know, the PCIe type drives that you have. We've moved so far beyond optical discs and not having to store them that to introduce this could be. I expect that the storage capacity of these optical discs is exceeding the storage requirements of the average user.
Well, that's a good thing, though. I mean, if we're honest.
That is. But at the same time, SSDs are kind of still exceeding the pace at which the average user can fill them. You know what I mean? You're still talking about that, like, I think this is going to be a niche product.
I don't know if I would say it's going to be a niche product. I'd say that it's going to be I think that pigeonholes it just a little bit. I think this is going to be the kind of thing you see, like, where we're still seeing tape backups today.
Do we still see tape backups?
It is still a thing, although everybody's trying to get out of it. That is still it, if I'm being completely honest. But tape backups were still a thing until recently.
There are. I know that there are tapes in the traditional sense, but I also, to my knowledge, they are not particularly common.
No, they're not. But where that's still a thing, I'm just trying to use it as a reference that basically anybody will get.
More to do with antiquated systems than it does like an actual thing that we want to use.
Oh no, absolutely. That is absolutely the case. Like, they wouldn't be in use if they weren't absolutely necessary. But I would see this becoming something that you might see in a more infrastructure or data backup kind of place, as opposed to something that the end user is going to see. That said, you never know what the industry is going to push, because the double A's, the RIAA and MPAA, would be more than happy to have a disk that they could throw the nastiest DRM on and make sure that you could never actually rip the thing and then release, you know, their stuff in 28K ultra mega HD with 7D sound or whatever, or have the full virtual reality experience of whatever on one disk. So, you know, you really don't know what's going to happen until it happens, right? Because this would be a really good way to package a video game or a movie experience or something like that that's going to be absolutely ridiculously large, like a portion of a world as a video game. So maybe this will be what they'll be running in PS10s, right?
It could be. I mean, and optical drives have their place. I'm very skeptical of the technology because this seems to be write only, right? And that's there's limits to how useful that is.
Yeah, well, fair. I mean, that's understandable, but if you're going to make a machine like that, you'd probably just include a solid-state drive with all the operational stuff, and then maybe another one that had all the read-write capacities so that you could do the things up modular. I don't know. I mean, it's all depending on how a designer wanted to go about that sort of thing, and that's really way outside of my wheelhouse. And though it is an interesting conversation, I don't know if either one of us is the one to have it. So I really would kind of like to get somebody on that's actually in industrial design. If anybody listening to that,
and in what way?
Like into product design. Honestly,
that's a rare field, my friend.
Well, if anybody that listens to this knows anyone in the late stage industrial design field, have them hit any one of us up, because that would be a really cool conversation to have, and I would love to get them on. So hit me up at that fake guy Dan. Hit him up at Ratman720 on most places for both of us. And Craig is at CraigBog99, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
CraigBob99, basically anywhere.
Do not feel offended if I do not respond, as I'm generally not engaged in Twitter anymore after the most recent round of bans.
Yeah, which there was another one just yesterday and today.
Yep. Yeah, no, I don't...
It resembles a hellscape.
It does. And because of that, I'm not really engaged in social media anymore.
But mine's is pretty decent.
Mine's is very good. I like it. The only problem is that the one thing that is really nice about Twitter is its algorithm, and the one thing that's terrible about Twitter is its algorithm, and the same thing's true for mine. It has no algorithm, which is really nice. It also has no algorithm, which makes it terrible.
Yeah, it's kind of the price you pay. But you know, you gotta pay to get into the ball.
About political discrimination, but at the same time,
you will see some things that you may not agree with at all.
Yep.
From both sides of the aisle.
I wouldn't have as much of an issue with the fact that there's things that I disagree with, except for the fact that it's more like you have to filter through a lot more stuff yourself.
Well, you do, but I mean, honestly, that's kind of the nature of the internet, and
It is.
So that being said, if definitely look us up on Minds, all of us. We're all on there, and if you want to get an actual discourse going with people of varying ideologies, you can actually get it there. You may not get it on a place like Parler. You're probably not going to get it on a place like Gab. You can get it on Twitter, but you're going to get banned. And so, yeah, if you want to actually have conversations, Minds is one of the better places that's out there right now. That's really a proper public forum. So look us up, and it's been a pleasure, and we'll talk to you all again real soon.